the willingness to be receptive to new experiences and to learn as you go is so important. And I think for anybody listening, really, if you look at the advances in things like Chat GPT, and over just like 6 months, right? I've never really subscribed to the job for life thing, but now it's like a job for a year, right? Because in a year we don't know what jobs, it's like, so, but I think that constant learning and the ability to adapt is probably, that outlook on life is probably more important than do you today know how to do JavaScript or iOS, because
Hello and welcome to Career Spotlight with Vanessa Ajimai. Today I have another amazing guest with me who is Mark Strefford, and he is a solution architect. I'm really excited for Mark to share some of the choices and steps that he's taken in order to get to where he's currently at and what he's doing. Make sure to subscribe to continue to hear more amazing career journey stories. So Mark, thank you so much for agreeing to come on to Career Spotlight. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Great. So we'll jump straight into it. If you could kind of start off by just telling us what you do and what your role consists of.
Yeah, sure. So solution architect is what I've found in technology is a lot of people can call themselves architects. It's one of those terms that can often be, I guess, overused, and it means many different things to many different people. From my perspective, a solution architect is someone that works very closely with both the business and the technology teams, and effectively is responsible for making sure that the solution works to meet the business. And that's end to end. So it's not necessarily this web page has the right forms and fields and information displayed on it, but that this web page connects to the backend systems to get the right data, will scale if you get 1 million users in the next hour, and this kind of thing. So it's more like the plumbing and the core components that sit behind the scenes, and making sure that that aligns with what the business really need.
Cool. How exactly did you get into this role?
Okay, so I've got a long and I guess quite a varied history. So I got my first computer when I was 11, and started to write games, and probably showing my age now, there was about 1K of memory in these things. So if you look at even like a typical phone with gigabytes of memory in them, when you've got 1K, you kind of have to learn how to optimize. And through my teens, I wrote a few games. It was at the time when the one guy in his bedroom, or the one kid in his bedroom, was no longer the model, and there was small design game agencies standing up. But it really gave me an appetite for technology and really gave me a good understanding of how it worked. So I went from there, had a couple of jobs that were software development related, and then I kind of felt lucky. I had some opportunities to work for some major consultancies, Capgemini being one of them, and I've spent a huge part of my career at Capgemini. And they really gave me the opportunity to grow and work on a variety of different projects. And they were sounding like I'm singing their praises a lot. They were most definitely of the mentality that if they thought you could do it, they would put you in a role and obviously support you. And I've just, it's just really helped so much from that perspective.
Yeah. And in terms of like your early years of education, really taking it back now, do you kind of remember the subjects that you picked and your motivations for picking those?
Yeah, it goes back to that day when I either chose to get my first computer. I saved up for it and I bought it, and I kind of knew in that moment what I wanted to do. So when I got to the point where I could choose subjects, they were computers, they were physics, they were you had to do maths. Business and information technology were the kind of core subjects that I really focused on, and and even when I got to A levels, maths, physics, and computers. So I think it suits, a part of me is really detailed and really technical. And yeah, so just carried on with that vein. I guess one thing to add is, quite, I guess, away from a lot of people in the industries, I don't have a degree. So for those people who think they have to go to university to get a good job in IT, that's not necessarily true. I think for some areas definitely, but not for everyone. So
Sure. If we go back to look at kind of your role, how has it evolved over time, like in terms of developing your technical skills?
um, so when I first got into when I first started working for a consultancy company was around the time when, the early 2000s, the dot-com boom was, bust, but people were still interested in the internet. And I was one of the few people. There was a whole bunch of people who could code in Java, but nobody knew how to deploy these applications. And I just spent a year and a half doing it somewhere else for a different company. So it really gave me a way in. And today you would call it DevOps. Back in those days, I guess the term wasn't necessarily called DevOps, but that's what it was. How do you build infrastructure repeatedly? How can you scale it? How can you deploy applications or in an automated manner? But it gave me a real good understanding of how all these different parts of a complex IT solution fitted together. How do you plug in security? How do you get your application there? And as my career's gone on, I've worked in some highly technical roles, and I've worked in some which are more senior role, where effectively you're facing off to the business, explaining technical stuff to them and why we're doing things the way we are and what the key risks are. So, I always find that there's a real balance there for me. I know some architects prefer to be very high level, and their view is like, here's all the core components are 100,000-foot view, and some architects are very much like, this is how you're going to effectively structure your code. And I kind of sit probably that bit. If that makes sense. I can sit across it all.
So I know you mentioned like JavaScript. From your perspective and your career, has there been like loads of other languages that you've had to kind of equip yourself with, depending on where you go?
Yeah, so very early in my teens, it was BASIC, and I actually learned a lot of games in those days were written in assembly, so it was effectively you're coding the microprocessor directly. Around the early 2000s, it was very much a Java driven. Everything was Java, and then I guess for me around 2012, Node came across my radar. So that's a variant of JavaScript, and I really got hooked on it. I built some demos, and it helped me also at the next stage of my career. Now, because I do a lot of data work as well, Python and JavaScript are probably the two main languages that I use. I could probably try Java again, but I wouldn't want to commit how good I am on that one.
And also mentioning how you kind of balance the technical aspects and then the liaison with like management. How have you balanced kind of like your technical side and then the business aspect as well?
Yeah, I think I see this somewhat regularly, where a project is deemed as an IT transformation or a technology transformation, but really, with probably a few exceptions, there's no such thing, right? Everything we do in technology is to meet a business requirement, whether that's non-exhaustive list, but we need more customers, we want to make more sales, it's costing us too much to run, we need to make operational efficiency. So what I find really helpful is in a core project is, what are those things that the business really want to get out of it? And typically there's quite a short list that our website's not flexible enough to to manage demand and upcoming products that we want to put out there. That's a fairly high level of business requirement that the business, like no matter who you speak to, will understand. Right? Okay, you can put some metrics around it, some detail. So what I've for as long as I can remember, I've always been really good at being able to say to the business, this is how technology will support that. And then to the technology guys, this is what the business need. And often it's the same message, but it's tweaking the language a little bit and more emphasis on certain things that the business don't care about, how many lines of code you wrote yesterday. It's like, are you on track? And will they see that sales increase, right? That's what they care about. The developers are probably less worried about sales increase unless they're thinking about their bonus at the end of the year, and more about, how they can, build a system that is flexible and they can deliver it on time and, or wherever it might be, right, in that situation.
Sure. And you mentioned like kind of changing the language or how you communicate.
Yeah.
How do you go about managing various stakeholders like expectations and carrying them along?
It can be tough at times. I will admit that, and it all comes down to personality, right? But we're all people at the end of the day, and we all want to see whatever we're doing. Well, with probably a few exceptions, right? Everyone wants to see what they're doing is a success, and I think this is, from a technical person's perspective, this can often be the hardest thing, is trying to understand and empathize with people and where they're coming from, what is really important to them, what they do and don't care about. And there's no substitute, in my opinion. Some people are probably really gifted with this from the day they're born, but for many of us techies, I guess it's just practice, and you kind of realize then that the finance guy just cares about, is his budget going to get blown? The operations guy is concerned about, will it fall over? It's this kind of thing, So the sales guy, or whatever it might be. So it's, and I'm obviously I'm simplifying it for the point, but it's when you worked on enough like major projects and you come through the ranks, you start to understand where people really want to go, and then you just kind of have to pitch accordingly.
Sure.
And learn quick. If you say something to them and they glaze over, okay, that's not the message. That's the wrong level. So
if there's people watching who think that maybe solution architect might be for them, but they're not sure, what advice would you provide to them?
So to become a solution architect, there's two things that I would, I guess, recommend. So the first one, like starting from the bottom up, from a technology perspective, get a good understanding of different kinds of technologies. You don't need to be the expert in all of them, because nobody can be, but you want to know, database applications, you want to know security, networking, and then everything's in the cloud, right? And it's clicking a button in AWS, but you still need to understand, why you want to restrict certain ports on your firewall, right? You need to understand that, because when you're having a conversation with your security guy, he's going to be saying, what do I need to do? And you'll be like, right, that's not going to get you anywhere. So an overview of a wide range of technologies, and there's loads of information out there now for that, and I would probably suggest going deep in one or two of them as well. So being the expert in whether that's microservice architecture or database resilience, because that way, when you're looking for a new role, you can say, this is what I'm going to bring, rather than I know a lot about it. It's like, you've got a problem, I can fix this for you, but you understand the context of where it fits. And then the other side most definitely is around how do you speak to the business, as wide a range of different projects as you can get. Or different environments. I know solution architects that are brilliant at e-commerce, and that's all they do. That's great. For me, it's always been a mix of different projects. So I guess either one of those works. It depends on your interests.
Sure. Is there specific resources that you could recommend for someone who wants to kind of look more into which area that they want to develop more in? and build the expertise?
I tend to find that architects come from, like solution architects tend to come from one or a couple of different backgrounds. So they'll come from an application domain or an infrastructure domain predominantly.
Okay. Yeah.
So what is, I guess, beneficial is as you're getting through your career and you're going from junior dev to towards senior dev, is start to understand that wider context of the applications. Like a lot of devs do, but it's not just being aware of it, it's actively thinking about it as you build your application. And that is probably the best step up. Like there's TOGAF and other architecture frameworks which are there's a lot of information out there. They work very well in some environments and maybe a heavyweight for others. So yeah.
When you're designing like solutions, what kind of approach do you normally take?
Okay, I think there's a number of things that play into this. So and I think it also depends on where I get engaged. Sometimes it's right up front, and other times the business have been thinking about it for 6 months. They might have done some technology work anyway. I'm a huge fan of, I'll say whiteboarding, but that can be written on a piece of paper in our mostly remote world these days. Like I'm very visual, so I think in pictures. So I find if I'm designing a solution, just drawing boxes on a piece of paper and drawing lines between them help you. It might not ever be what goes back in front of my client or my customer or the business, but it is very beneficial to me kind of sketching out how this thing would work. A core thing. Yeah, there's a bit of a joke, I guess, in some circles around solution architects, and they're brilliant at PowerPoint, right? But I think that visual representation of complex, potentially complex scenarios is absolutely beneficial. To most people understand the diagram, right? So, and then there are times when it becomes very detail focused. On a recent project, we were trying to plug together two systems, and we had to effectively go through 400 lines of data items one by one, matching them up. So it's not all big picture stuff. Sometimes you have to get really detailed and focused. So it depends. But definitely I guess the key people I work closely with are things like the business architect, the business analyst, the project managers, program managers, who owns the budget, the business owner, and the technology teams, the devs and the infrastructure guys. So, and then it really means how do you fit in with them? Do they want pictures? Do they want tickets raising with acceptance criteria? So you kind of have to vary your approach then.
Yeah, with some of those people that you mentioned, so like business analysts, the program manager, etc. How does like collaboration look like with those other roles when it comes to like designing a solution?
So if you look at the business analyst, business focused people, they're more interested in how for example, the business process will run through the system, and my kind of engagement in that conversation is one, to understand it. You've got these 5, 6, 10, 20 steps of a process, whatever that might be. What capabilities do you need? Because that for me is how do I map that out into, well, that needs to be bespoke code, or actually there's a SaaS product that does this, or we've already got a service in-house that does it. So that's that engagement from a development perspective. It's then articulating, we've got this box and we need to build it, for example. The BA will come along with a set of functional requirements, but I would be responsible effectively for the non-functional. So what's its response times? Is it available? What security controls do we need to wrap around it, and this kind of thing. So making sure that they're all defined. From a program manager perspective, often simply they want to see things going from on the backlog to in progress to done, right? But there's a key part to that engagement, and that's helping them understand what risks are and what the mitigating actions, because every IT project has risks. There are unknowns, there are things that must happen, but we don't know if they can in time. So it kind of comes back to that. What's the message, right? Program manager is it done yet? And if it's not, why not? And what's the risk and how do we fix it? Simply, obviously. Yeah.
Sure. When you're working and you come across like unexpected roadblocks or challenges, how do you go about overcoming those obstacles?
So I think the first thing is, it's okay to have a bit of thinking time before unless you've just got a major system outage and it's taking millions of pounds an hour, right? Typically, I look to take a little bit of time just to think about it, maybe ask some questions to try and understand it. There are I've worked with many people, and the moment there's an issue there, shouting to management, this has all gone wrong, right? And it can be a bit cry wolf, right? Because as soon as something really serious goes wrong, everyone's like, oh, it's they're just making noise. So I think being able to just take that moment to understand what's happening, to hypothesize some options, right? It doesn't mean they're going to be, there might be an obvious one, oh yeah, this will fix it, but often you don't know how you're going to fix it. And then working out who are those stakeholders that you need to get engaged. So is it a purely technical problem? Is it a business problem? Is it invariably a mix of the two? And then being able to say, right, okay, being able to articulate that back to them in a way that they understand, then they can, they've got options with some relative pros and cons against them.
So when it comes to like your skills and kind of professional development, over time, how have you is there specific courses that you've personally done to like develop yourself? And how do you like continue to stay curious and engaged throughout like your career and role?
Yeah, there's a mix. So Udemy is a great platform. Pluralsight's a great platform. I've also done work on courses on Coursera and Udacity. So there is so much information out there that really the only limiting factor in what you can learn is probably time and willingness. Like I bought myself a course a couple of years back. I want to play about with augmented reality and understand it a little bit more. I paid $20 for a course on Udemy on iOS AR development, and I learned so much from it. A couple of little apps and things, right? So it's there's so much information out there, but I would also not underestimate the power of working with other great people. Even at a senior level, there are people who are more as senior, or even people who aren't as senior that have had experience in other sectors or other, seen other things, right? It's about being willing to learn from whatever environment you're in. And often I'm paid to go in as an expert, but I will 100% admit I'm not an expert at everything. So I'm always learning from the people around me and the situations that come up. And I think it probably holds truth for any career. But the willingness to be receptive to new experiences and to learn as you go is so important. And I think for anybody listening, really, if you look at the advances in things like Chat GPT, and over just like 6 months, right? I've never really subscribed to the job for life thing, but now it's like a job for a year, right? Because in a year, we don't know what jobs, it's like, so, but I think that constant learning and the ability to adapt is probably, that outlook on life is probably more important than do you today know how to do JavaScript or iOS, because, that could be, I'm not sure it will be, but it could be irrelevant in a couple of years. And then it's like, okay, what do I need to learn now? So
seeing as you've mentioned Chat GPT, I've heard loads of various different perspectives and opinions on that. From your role and position as a like solution architect, what are kind of like your views in using that to support your everyday kind of work, I guess.
So okay, so there's two parts to that. One is it can be a great efficiency, a tool that you can use. Yeah. Like I see a lot of posts on social media now. Become the next copywriting superstar without ever writing a word effectively. And kind of, if it works for you, okay, right. I'm not going to judge that, right? Because I'm pretty sure some people are making a lot of money doing that. And then the opposite side is absolutely too scared to embrace it because you think technology is going to make you irrelevant, right? And I think the truth is, well, I guess for some roles maybe that will happen, but the truth is, it's probably somewhere in the middle. It has its uses for sure. I think if you are in the copywriting world, it potentially has the ability for you to write quicker or to change the tone or to get write one article and easily and effortlessly chunk it up into smaller chunks and put that out, right? So as a tool, it's great. I think some of the coding aspects of it I've used and have been really helpful. Sometimes what it's given me just doesn't work. And but so will it make coding irrelevant? I think in some areas it might do. But I think if you look at the kind of projects I get involved in when they span in multiple systems and you've got many stakeholders and you've got SaaS products, stuff that was developed 20 years ago, you're building this new functionality. There's too much information there for, I think, something like Chat GPT at this point in time to be able to comprehend it. So yes, it's a good tool. It's not the answer to everything. Will it be in a year? I don't know. I'm not going to, excuse me, I'm not going to guess at that one because nobody knows.
Sure. Currently, what do you think are some of like the biggest challenges that solution architects are facing?
Hey, good question. I think the pace of technology change is one. We just talked about Chat GPT. There are, I think we're probably more at a point in time where an approach to architecture might need to change. So, if you look at some of the larger organizations I've worked for, architecture is this months-long process of defining it and getting it approved, and then getting the next level and getting that approved, right? And if you look at the pace of change in certain areas, right, that just doesn't work. If you're in central government, the pace of change is typically slower. Public sector. If you're in a highly regulated industry, probably the same. If you're in an e-commerce company, a tech startup, you don't have time for that, right? The world's moved on so much in that 3 months that it's so it's how do you compress that and make it still valuable to the business. Why do we need a solution architect? You do one picture and put it on the wall, right? Yeah, but I can talk about that with anybody in the business, right? So I'm making sure everyone's aligned to that vision. It's a very different thing, and understandably, right, you need governance at place. You need if everyone just randomly made changes, right, everything would fall over. So you do need a level of governance, and I think that for me is I've actually made a couple of articles about they're going out on LinkedIn about this, is what's like the bare minimum that you can do that gives value to the business in terms of assuredness of what they're going to get as a technology product, but not getting so bogged down to the pace of change just out accelerates you. So for people getting into the game and myself as well, it's that for me is a big challenge now.
Yeah. And you talked about long-term vision. When it comes to balancing, like obviously things that you need to get done now, so your short-term goals, how do you balance that and still ensure that, I guess, the end outcome of the solution is still going to be something that's sustainable?
Um, as in principle, we're kind of here and we want to be here. And there's a straight line path, which no project ever follows unless it's so simple. You typically like going like this to get there. For me, the key thing is each decision that you make, you need to make it from where you want to be, or at least understand where you want to be in the context of making that decision. And absolutely, there are times when you just have to build something that you know will be thrown out in 3 months or 6 months, but it's the quickest way of getting that solution out the door to meet what the business needs. The key thing about that, though, is those decisions are recorded in some way. Whether you call it tech debt or an architecture decision log, it doesn't really matter what the terminology is.
Yeah.
Or there needs to be at least an awareness that, well, we've got to spend X thousands of pounds on development time to build this, and in 3 months it's gone, right? Because in 3 months the proper thing will be available. Well, if it says 3 months, it'll probably be like 4, 5, or 6, but at least you've got that traceability of why you've made the decision. I think if you just make things and we're here and we're just going to make some decisions, they just kind of go and you never get there, right? So it's that that frame, how you frame the context around it.
Sure. And then when it comes to monitoring of like performance, what approach do you take?
As in, does the solution meet what it's set out to do?
Yeah.
So there are a number of perspectives on that one. Functionally and non-functionally, obviously, a good testing regime. Does it meet the use case that's been articulated in the particular tickets? It's also really useful, and from an agile development perspective, we have things like show and tells. It shows the business how you're progressing, and it all invariably raises questions, and the business is like, hang on a minute, that's not quite what we meant, or hang on a minute, it's triggered another idea and we can do it better, right? So getting to the end of a project and having those conversations is way too late. Being able to do them all the way through is a huge advantage. And then I think it then comes down to what the project is. So for example, if you've got a data science project, a machine learning model that's making some predictions on what let's say what products someone might buy, or are you predicting failures in equipment over time, you can measure that pretty accurately. Because you say, well, actually the failure rate was 1 in 1,000, and now we've got that down to 1 in 3,000 because we've identified these failures before they happen. That's a metric. Sales of products in e-commerce is that measure is probably not my expertise, but I would say your product went up 5% in sales is great, but you have to take into play market conditions in that one. So it's probably a little bit more on the hypothesis side. But yeah, those are the kind of things you can do.
Yeah. In simple terms, when you talk of machine learning, what is that?
It's one of those words also that means a lot of things to a lot of people. Some people like flippantly call it a list of if-then statements, which is not strictly true because the way I look at machine learning is most organizations have got data. There are often challenges around getting access to that data or the data being clean. But let's assume that we've got a data set which reflects customer behavior, machinery behavior, wherever it might be. You can analyze that data and you can spot trends in it. So you might spot the I don't know, raincoats, right? I've got a seasonal peak and trend. It's a very simple example, but you could easily extrapolate that to taxi arrival times like Uber do, for example. So machine learning for me is about building a model on that data. So effectively you take all that data and you train your model, and that can make predictions about what's likely to happen in the future. So if you look at the Uber example, and very, very simply, they have an understanding of traffic conditions, how far you are away from a particular driver, and they can make a prediction based on the route and the traffic, how long it's going to take him to get to you. Now that's they've got terabytes of data for this model. Most companies don't have that. They might have 10, 50 megabytes maybe. But you can still get value out of it, and it's rare over time. Where I think you have to be careful with machine learning is where the conditions dramatically change. So I worked on a project a few years back where we were trying to predict installation failures of some at-home devices by engineers, and all the data we had was pre-COVID. So everyone was at the office. So we had a set of data that suggested most people wouldn't be home. And of course, lockdown happens. And then everyone goes into like hybrid working after. The data was kind of irrelevant, right? We had to kind of iterate it as we were going along. So, but we were, so that's kind of machine learning, taking some data and training a model and with the aim of getting business benefit. That's the key thing.
Throughout like your role, overall, what do you think has been some of like your key accomplishments and successes?
There's a couple of projects that I really did enjoy working on. So one of them was around 2011, 12, 13, putting a brand new Eurostar.com. So I was working for Capgemini, and everyone thinks Eurostar.com is just a website, but you think about running a pan-European rail scheduling rail ticketing service, and be able to book hotels. There's a lot more complexity behind the scenes, and we had I think we had development teams on 3 continents in 5 different countries. So it was very much a global operation to pull this together. I started the project for a 6 weeks piece of work to help the lead architect, and about week 5 he went to do a different project. So it was great because the team was great, the client was great, and I told about Capgemini at that time giving me the opportunity to step up into a role I'd never done before. So I built such great relationships with both the Capgemini team and with the client, and with some of the partners, that I really love that one. So excuse me. Some of the more recent work I've done has been in more about emerging technology, or emerging is a strange word, right? Because some of this technology has been around for 10 years, 15, 20 years, right? But, should we put technology that's now reaching mainstream, or potentially reaching mainstream adoption? So things like augmented reality and virtual reality. So I've worked on a couple of projects for that over the last 3 or 4 years. And that's been really interesting, mostly because they've been smaller organizations. So it's very much like we'll have a conversation about it in the morning and build it in the afternoon, which is great. But also very much more aligned with where I want to take my career now. And that's that higher level strategy of, we've got, you've got blockchain, you've got, Web3, you've got AR, VR, AI, right? All of these things, and what business models are they opening up, right? So this isn't just because I've got such a great background in technology, I can talk about them things in a way that is, hopefully somewhat more grounded in reality than what, than rather than just like AI will rule the world. It's like, well, how are you gonna, what does that mean, right? For what? So so I think those are in recent years the key highlights.
Well,
I think give them to all the clients that I've just not mentioned. So.
And with what you know now, like with quite a lot of years under your belt, what are some of like the top lessons learned that you think you can share?
Couple of things, I guess. The don't ever be afraid to speak what you think. For personally, for a large part of my career, I would defer to the vice president in the room. And it took me a little while to realize that, as brilliant as a lot of these people are, right, I'm the techie in the room and I know how technology works, right? So always always be open to sharing what you believe, even if you're dismissed, or and obviously do it in a constructive way. Don't tell everyone they're stupid, right? that doesn't work for a career. So being able to proactively sharing what you think and as a way to make things happen. We're all people. I think it follows on from that whoever you're dealing with in your organization or a client or whoever it might be, we're all people, and in the main, people I think just want to get together and help each other and make things happen. Other lessons, keep learning for sure. Like I said earlier, technology is advancing so fast that be prepared to fail as well. I know it's a hard thing. I've had some pretty big failures in my career, and at the time they are really not pleasant. But for every single one of them, I've learned and grown, and I don't think I've ever made the same mistake again. I don't. But it's like just keep learning. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your career journey, and also key industry kind of pointers. I'm sure that anyone interested and that has been able to stay up till now will pick loads of things. So thank you so much. That's been great and insightful.
Thank you.